Yesterday we had looked at the location of mountain ranges, and we noticed that canyons occurred where there were mountain ranges. So today we're going to look at some other patterns that happen across the globe that involve the location of canyons and mountains, but also we're going to look at volcanic activity and earthquakes and how those relate to where we find canyons across the globe. So think about some other Earth features that might occur in global patterns or groups. Sometimes we see islands in groups. A lot of times if you find an island, there'll be more than one together. Sometimes we'll find lakes together. Like an example would be the Great Lakes in the northern United States. And of course, we talked yesterday about mountain ranges, that we find mountains in groups. I'm going to show you two photographs of rock features. I want you to take a minute to just observe those pictures. You might want to jot down what you notice about those. You're going to record that in your Google Doc at the end of the lesson. Some of the things that you might notice in the first photograph is there's a big crack that runs down the middle of the rocks. And there's layers in the rocks, but those layers don't exactly line up. I wonder why. Those cracks seem to be kind of wavy. They're definitely not straight lines. In this second photograph, there's something dark that's covering the rocks in the Grand Canyon. And it kind of looks like it's going down the sides of the canyon. What do you think may have caused the features that you see in those two photographs? We're going to discover in just a few moments that even though both of these photographs are from the Grand Canyon, that all across the world we can find similar things. So here's an up-close picture of the first photograph. Now this rock has a fault line running through it. So if you look at that line that goes, that darkest, deepest line that goes across there, that's formed by an earthquake. An earthquake has enough force, if there's a strong enough quake, they'll have enough force to cause rocks to move in this way. And like I said, that's something that happens across the globe. So we're going to look at a map in just a second, and this map is going to show locations of earthquakes between 1963 and 1998. So here's the map. Those black dots represent earthquakes. Like I said, they were from 1963 to 1998. If there was an earthquake, then there is a black dot there on the map. The title of this map tells us that there were 358,214 earthquakes in that time period. So take a minute to look at this and see what patterns you notice about the location of all these earthquakes. One of the first things that stood out to me is that on the left side, or the western side of the United States, of North and South America, not just the United States, but all down the western side of the two continents, there's really heavy black line. Those dots are so close together, and there's so many, that it almost looks like solid lines. And as you move over to the eastern side of the continents, there's not nearly as much earthquake activity. I also noticed that down the center of the Atlantic Ocean, that there's There's a solid string of black dots through the center of the ocean to show that there have been a lot of earthquakes there. There's also been a lot of earthquakes by Asia and Australia on the other side of the globe. There's so many in Europe that you can hardly even see where Europe is on that map. It's covered in black dots. So what do you notice, thinking back to the map that we looked at yesterday of the mountain ranges, do you notice that the earthquakes are in the same places that the other map showed mountains and canyons? Well, it looks like earthquakes happen where there are mountains and canyons. We can make a prediction from based on what we've seen, that earthquakes happen where there are mountains and canyons. Well, now we're going to look at the second picture. Here's the second photograph that we looked at. This is another photograph of the Grand Canyon, but like I said earlier, remember, just because these two photographs that we're looking at are of the Grand Canyon, these are things that happen across the world. We can see similar things in a lot of other places. So in this photograph, there's a lot of black material that's covering the rocks. So we're going to look at what that black material is up close. This is volcanic rock. So if you think about a volcano, when it erupts, of course, it's very, very hot. And that volcanic rock that you're seeing here is actually lava that flows, and then as it cools, it hardens into rock like you see here. So volcanoes are features of the earth because they're like a mountain. They're stationary. They're there all the time. But of course, they don't erupt all the time. So the eruption is more like a process because it's something that just happens at one point in time. So now we're going to take a look at a map. Before I switch over to the map, I want you to think back to the mountain range map that we looked at yesterday and the map of the earthquake locations that we looked at earlier. And I want you to see if you see any similarities between those maps and this one. Those red dots or triangles that are on the map show volcanoes. And do you notice that the volcanic activity where those red dots are very similar to the places where there was very heavy earthquake activity? Now, there's definitely not nearly as many volcanoes as there are earthquake dots from earthquakes, but we can definitely see patterns in where they are located. And then if we think back to the map of the mountain ranges, those are very similar too. We can see that they almost always seem to occur in patterns where we find mountain ranges, we find canyons, and there's also earthquake and volcanic activity in those areas as well. So how can we use global patterns of Earth features and processes to predict canyon location? So like we said just a minute ago, it looks like canyons are found near mountains, and where you find mountains, a lot of times you also find volcanoes and definitely earthquakes. So they're all located in similar places around the world. Right, so today for your reflection on your science lesson, you have a Google Doc, and you're going to answer a few questions about what we've talked about today on your doc. So make sure that you get that taken care of, and everyone have a good day.